Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I am your host, Gavin, and I'm going solo today to talk a little bit about the Knicks' big victory over the Orlando Magic. And then we are going to get into the game tonight against the Magic. And finally, a little bit of conversation on the Knicks' place in the Eastern Conference. If that sounds familiar to you, and you already heard the audio version of this podcast, it's because I am re-recording it for video because the first time I messed it up. So I'm doing it again. There'll be some new content because I'm not going to say exactly the same things in exactly the same order. Or maybe you're just watching for the first time on YouTube. And if so, really, really appreciate it. And we hope you subscribe. So without further ado, let's get into it. You are Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. And as always, we appreciate you making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. I want to remind you this episode of Locked On Knicks is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. All right, guys, we really, really appreciate you tuning in to the Locked On Knicks podcast now on YouTube. This episode, again, to some extent, exclusively on YouTube, because as I noted in the little intro, I have to record it, or I had to re-record it. So we'll talk about some of the same stuff for a second time, and we will get into some new stuff. Knicks-Magic, a 121-96 victory for the New York Knicks over the Orlando Magic on Friday night. I can start with a general recap, but I almost think it's pointless. It's felt like whatever analogy you want to make, JV versus varsity, college versus high school, NBA versus college. This felt like two teams playing at two different levels. The Magic starting lineup of, I think it was Jalen Suggs, it was Cole Anthony, it was Wendell Carter Jr., it was Mo Bamba. They also had Franz Wagner in there. Really, really young, and a bunch of guys that don't necessarily really fit together. And it was pretty clear going up against the team in the Knicks, not just with more talent, but that fits together exceptionally well. They were overmatched from the get-go. It was like 36-16 at the end of the first. It was something like 67-35 at halftime. It was really, really ugly for the Magic. And this game, I almost look at, it's more of like a glorified practice for the Knicks. And that sounds, look, if you heard me say that a couple years ago about the Knicks against anyone, someone probably would have hit me in the face and said, "Wake up, you're in a coma," because that would not have been the case in the past. But the New York Knicks, it's a brand new day. Let's get in a little bit into individual performance. I really love this game from Julius Randle: 21 points, 10 boards, 7 assists, 2 steals, 9 of 16 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3-point range, and man, he was just on point with essentially everything he did. I mean, and it was so fun to watch him with shooters spread around because he can kind of do like a poor man's LeBron thing out there, right? Where he's just bulldozing his way down the lane. He's sort of the chess master at the top of the arc, orchestrating everything, throwing cross court dimes, having the height to see it, and like the strength to get the ball there with accuracy and speed. It's been a joy to watch with Julius Randle. And it started very early in this one. He went cross court to Kemba Walker for a corner pop. Then he had a pump, a drive, hit Fournier for a wing three. Then he hit a left wing three of his own, had a dribble handoff to Derrick Rose for a bucket, then got out in transition with Rose, little give and go, transition dunk, automatic. And then a give and go into a pick and roll with Evan Fournier. And those two, I mean, we can get into it as we go. And I know it's something that Alex has already talked about a lot. But Julius Randle and Evan Fournier have such incredible chemistry. And it's exactly sort of what we predicted was a possibility. I mean, I think before the preseason, and certainly what we saw in the preseason games, were just a more dynamic version of what Julius Randle had with Reggie Bullock. But Fournier opens up so many possibilities. The guy is incredibly underrated in terms of his ability to get all the way to the rim. It is just, I mean, as he's shown through these first two games, just a fantastic 3-point shooter, but also a really smart passer. And there's just so much beauty in having two players who are that skilled and that smart and are willing to play off each other and enjoy playing off each other. And I think there's a lot of success to be had for the Knicks, basing a lot of actions around those two, or just spreading it out and letting those two get into an improvised thing because they're good enough to do just that. But more from Randall. Had another drive and kick to Fournier for three, a drive and an up and under to Mitch for a pump and dunk. Little dream shake move where I think it was a throw in, and then he sort of caught it with his back to the basket and had a reverse pivot, little pump fake. Both defenders bit on it, step in for a lay. And that's again, these are the dimensions of Julius Randle's game that we get to see now that this offense has more talent. Because last year, right, it was all like 3-3-3, step back fadeaway, long fadeaway mid range two, contested 2-point jumper. All that stuff it was hard. It was playing in the muck. And now Randle has all this room, and you can see, oh, he has a post game. We know about the passing, but he can just take guys off the dribble like he did with Robin Lopez at one point and get all the way to the rim for a dunk because there aren't three defenders around the hoop waiting to meet him there. So this is a new lease on life, I would say, for Julius Randle, and he is taking full advantage of it. He had another. It was sort of a dribble handoff to Fournier, but it was almost like a behind the back pass. It was like somewhere in between the two. Fournier, excuse me, was in and out on the three, but it was a great play. And I wrote down in my notes, it's like Evan Fournier had the Reggie Bullock brain chip downloaded to his head because it feels like he picked off right where Reggie left off. Kemba was just he was fine in this game. I mean, he was just a spot up shooter. He's 4 for 8 from the field, 3 for 5 from three. Wasn't asked to do all that much. And he succeeded in not having to do all that much. We already mentioned Fournier, worth noting 4 for 9 for three, just 5 for 12 from the field. I think the 2-point shooting will come around with him. The 3-point shooting will probably fall off a little bit. The point is he is going to be hyper efficient this year, and it helps that he got to the line 5 times or for 5 free throws and made 4 of them in 27 minutes. RJ Barrett, a pretty quiet game, like nondescript, 7 points, 7 boards, 3 assists. This was a case of one, he went 0 for 5 from three and missed 2 free throws, so left a lot of points on the board, like even like an average efficiency night for him, and he would have had 14 points. So that is certainly worth noting, but didn't really have to do a ton. I think that's one of my bigger curiosities with this Knicks starting lineup this year. It's how much does RJ take over? Like when are the nights where he is the guy who is running things offensively and he's like snaking into an elbow jumper or he's getting all the way to the rim with consistency? And I think we'll have periods where he takes over like that. But I wonder what the hierarchy is when RJ gets hot and Julius is still the guy, and to some extent Kemba is still the guy, and to some extent Fournier is really, really good and needs to touch the ball a lot when he's in there. How do you balance all that? I know that's something I've talked about quite a bit already, but I think it's worth the ongoing conversation because it's pretty relevant to how this Knicks team ultimately turns out. All right, let's wrap up this starting lineup and then we'll head to our first break. Mitchell Robinson, 6 points, 9 boards, did have 5 fouls in 28 minutes, which obviously is something as a historical benchmark for him that's not fantastic and not really what you want necessarily. But still, I thought pretty good effort from him. He did take a hard fall at one point near the end of his time in the game and grabbed his hamstring, but stayed in, played pretty decently. My big takeaway on Mitch so far is I don't think he is moving great. And I think it's a situation where it's hard to tell, is that just the added weight, or is that because he is still not 100% in terms of his conditioning? And I think it's more likely the conditioning element of it. And I kind of question, in a world where Nerlens Noel and Taj Gibson were healthy, if Mitchell Robinson would even be playing right now, because it feels like this is sort of out of necessity, right? Because if Mitch is out too, then all of a sudden you have Jericho Sims playing 35 minutes a game and getting 13 minutes of Obi at the 5. And you probably still beat the Magic like that, but you're making things a lot tougher on yourself than they have to be. So I think they're sort of pushing Mitch through some early trials and tribulations in terms of his fatigue. And getting him to a point where he could potentially be in great shape out there. And I think we will see that sooner rather than later with Mitchell Robinson. And when we do, again, I've long argued it. I genuinely think there is some latent offensive potential there to unlock. This game did not get a lot of shots, a lot of looks. I think there'll be nights where he really, really goes off. But let's take our first break, and I'm going to tell you all about McDonald's. This episode of Locked On Knicks is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's a place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. So head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say Locked On Knicks watch party? And the only way to end this is by saying, I'm loving it. All right, with that, let's circle around and mention our NBA season preview. We wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. For your second listen, get everything you need from contender to pretender around the NBA with the ultimate insider NBA season preview, the biggest and most comprehensive season preview you can find wherever you get your podcasts. All right, and with that, we're back on Locked On Knicks. Thank you for tuning in as always. And again, you already know we're on YouTube, but please hit the subscribe button when you have a sec. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we're gonna keep having great pods, great guests, all of the above on Locked On Knicks. All right, so we went through the starters. Let's circle around to the bench a little bit, and then maybe before we wrap up the second segment, we can get into what to look out for tonight from the New York Knicks. Obi Topping was pretty awesome this one. 23 minutes, 13 points, 2 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, a block, 5 for 8 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3-point range, and I marvel at the guy's ability to run the floor. Like it was weird. I didn't take a whole lot of notes because it felt like all of his buckets were like there was very little self creation there. It was a lot of kickouts to 3. It was a lot of running again, just running the court. Like he had this brilliant play where he just beat literally everyone down the floor, and Rose hit him on like a 70-foot on a dime bomb of a pass that was really, really, really good. And I think right now, Obi, like, would you put him in like the 5 fastest guys in the league end to end? It feels like he just has a lot of different mechanisms by which to even if it's not self-created, he has a lot of different mechanisms by which to get easy buckets, which is really, really thrilling. And again, he just contributes to the Knicks offense right now is generating a lot of open threes. Fred Katz, the Knicks' newest beat writer of The Athletic, who we'd love to have on at some point, he pointed out on Twitter that 46 of the Knicks' 54 three-point attempts against the Magic last night were classified as open or wide open. 38 of their threes were catch and shoot. So the Knicks were getting really high-quality shots all night. It's worth noting because they somehow haven't yet that the Knicks had a team record for threes made in a game with 24. I think the previous record was just 21. So that's pretty amazing that they got that done in just the second game of the year. And I thought Obi's efforts from distance were emblematic of that, where it feels like when he's shooting well, everyone is shooting well. Next guys I want to note, Derrick Rose and Alec Burks. Rose played 24 minutes and had 12 points and 7 assists. Burks played 18 minutes and had 12 points and 7 assists. I'm just going to say exciting on both counts. I mean, it just feels like the Knicks have an excess of playmaking right now. Like it's a luxury for the Knicks, the amount of playmaking they have right now. And in that second unit, it feels like everyone, it's very similar to the first unit, 1 through 4, when you go Rose, Burks, IQ, Obi. Everyone can pass, everyone can dribble, everyone can shoot. And with Obi, you're stretching it a little bit on some of those. But by backup 4 standards, he can pass, dribble, shoot pretty well, especially the passing and to some extent, seemingly the shooting has really come around for him. But it, again, similar to the starting offense, it creates this multiplicative effect when all those guys have that diverse of a range of skills. And I thought Burks in particular was just pretty masterful passing the basketball in this one. He had a really nifty little give to Jericho Sims for a dunk, and then had a little like toss and throwback to Obi for 3, hit some threes of his own, behind the back to Obi for 3, and then his pass of the game, he was operating on the left wing and just kind of threw the ball. It was almost kind of Pat Mahomes-esque. Like he didn't throw it where IQ was. He threw it where he wanted him to go get it, leading Emmanuel quickly to the corner, quickly charged it down, caught it, bombed a 3. And I'm just loving what we saw from Alec Burks in this one. If he can keep that up, again, it elevates the Knicks to one of the best couple of benches in basketball. Rose, I think it's just, 4 for 6 from 3, at least so far. The shooting is really continuing from last year. I think, and it's worth remembering that he didn't get a lot of times with both IQ and Burks and himself all in the lineup. And that is an element that could certainly come around for Derrick Rose this year. Emmanuel quickly, he didn't really have to do much, right? It was just bombing away from three. He was 5 for 10 from the field, 4 for 8 from long range, 2 for 2 from the charity stripe. Also had 3 assists and a steal, 16 points in 20 minutes for Emmanuel quickly. He missed his first 3, and then from that point again was pretty much automatic. And it feels like, again, it's a luxury piece when Emmanuel quickly, a guy who's capable of creating his own shot, who's capable of going one-on-one with someone and creating a long 3 off the dribble, doesn't necessarily have to go to that extent, right? He can just spot up and make easy shots. And at that point, you're talking about someone who is overqualified for his position. And again, if I were to sum up all the success of the Knicks right now, it's that across the board, they're fairly overqualified for the role that they are playing. And that is a sign that you have a very, very, very good team. All right, with that, let's get into tonight's game a little bit, because there is some follow-up stuff on all this that I want to see. And I mean, again, like not in the sense that the Knicks could play much better. They were kind of slow in the third quarter. They had something like 6 points through the first 6 minutes of the third. But there are elements to this that I would like to see the Knicks continue to sharpen up a little bit. I kind of want to see more coherency in terms of like the entire offense being involved. And we've seen like very successful, like we obviously between Randall and Fournier, very successful 2-man game. I want to see 3, 4, 5 guys building together, passing sequences. I want to see Mitchell Robinson, as we've noted a couple times, continue to get into better and better shape. I want to see Obi Topping winning off the dribble a little bit, like maybe just like one self-created bucket from him a game that is not off his patented fake dribble handoff. Just a little bit of diversity from Obi Toppin, I think, would be again beneficial, and just stretch bench defenses that much more. And same from Emmanuel quickly. Like again, it was a lot of fun watching him just bomb threes, but I want to see some of that self-creation. He did have 3 assists last game, continuing the passing. But tonight, the benchmark is low for the Knicks, right? Or I guess it's high, but it's very achievable. It's like they should blow out the Magic. There's no reason, even playing a team twice, which is always a little bit weird and like tends to lead to a very competitive second game. If the first game was not very competitive, there's no reason the Knicks should not beat the Orlando Magic by 20 plus points tonight. All right, with that, let us take our second break, and when we come back, we can talk the Eastern Conference and where the Knicks rank in the big picture in the Eastern Conference. But first, I have to tell you all about Built Bar. Did you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors? There's something for everyone. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their faves. If you don't know the Built flavors, well, you're missing out. There's coconut, there's cherry barcia, there's raspberry, there's mint brownie, there's double chocolate, there's salted caramel, there's strawberry, there's orange, there's cookies and cream, there's German chocolate. Know what my favorite flavor is? It has to be coconut. If you haven't tried all the flavors, you can get a mix box where you'll get 2 of each of the 9 flavors. Not only are Built Bar flavors the best tasting, they're healthy too. Check out the macros. There's 17 to 8 grams of protein per bar, calories ranging from 130 to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams net carbs. Amazing flavors, all tasty, all healthy. You can order today and get the grasshopper cookie or raspberry or whatever you like. Built Bar is the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. Isn't that neat? So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks' third and final segment. Again, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. All right, so the Knicks currently rank, after last night, second in the Eastern Conference. They are second in scoring differential as well at plus 14.5. They're behind only the undefeated 3-0 somehow Chicago Bulls. But that is not really the team I'm concerned about in terms of where the Knicks rank in the Eastern Conference hierarchy. So let's start off here. Brooklyn and Milwaukee. I believe despite Miami absolutely wrecking Milwaukee's you-know-what, they are still probably in the next tier over. And Milwaukee, look, earned the benefit of the doubt. I mean, look, not that it was one game. I'm going to stop talking about it. But they are the defending NBA champions. And as a lot of people point out, there's a certain swagger, there's a certain confidence, there's a certain know-how. There's that faith that, like, we don't think we can win it. We won it. We know we can win it. And we're going to do it again. Brooklyn, they know we would have won it if we were healthy. And obviously, the Kyrie Irving thing is the fly in the ointment. And I would, going into the season, I would have had with a fully vaccinated Kyrie Irving, which maybe is oxymoronic because it didn't seem like that's something he's ever going to do. I would have had Brooklyn in their own tier, and I don't think it would have been that close. I think Brooklyn is just on another level relative to Milwaukee with a full lineup. Without a full lineup, we saw what happened. Milwaukee beat them on opening night. I think those teams are very, very evenly matched in a world where Kyrie Irving never comes back this season. But Brooklyn is still absolutely stacked. I still think Kevin Durant is the best player in the NBA. I think James Harden, operating at full capacity, is very much in that conversation, if a couple spots back. And that's a pretty hard duo to beat when you surround them with shooting and vets and smarts and passing and a couple of really good defenders as well. Next tier, I think I have Atlanta probably as the third best team. I mean, them and Miami, it's close, but I like Atlanta's balance a little bit more. And I mean, you could argue Miami come playoff time is more dangerous because of that experience, but in the regular season, I'm more inclined to take, again, Atlanta's sheer depth and youth and the fact that they feel like almost a rich man's version of the Knicks in some way, which I know is tough, would be a tough pill to swallow given what happened last season. But again, just extreme balance and like almost even more of it than the Knicks have. As much as the Knicks have depth and balance. I mean, having like Cam Reddish, who looks like a star through 2 games of the year, coming off the bench, Kevin Herter coming off the bench, John Collins, Clint Capella, Trey Young, DeAndre Hunter, all in your starting lineup. Like they are just stacked, 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 stacked. And I'd be very surprised if they were the number one seed in the East at the end of the year. Wouldn't blow my mind if they were the number one seed in the East at the end of the year. I think they're potentially that good. Miami also really, really, really awesome. Tyler Hero clearly has, or seemingly has, made a jump, and that I think was much needed for them because they were a team coming into the year. I thought obviously they're going to be scary defensively, but I wasn't really sure if they had enough juice on offense. And I think Hero becoming a consistent 20-point per game scorer certainly changes the math on all that and is worth, and is worth acknowledging and is worth saying that puts Miami right there. I have the Knicks also well, the Knicks and Boston, I would say, would be my next tier. But I think the Knicks, at least right now, very early in the year, would sort of be pushing to get into that second tier with Miami and Atlanta. And I think the Knicks, again, theoretically, have the talent to belong in that conversation and could be just as good as Miami and Atlanta. And we've seen it through 2 games. Again, just the extreme balance up and down the team, both in terms of how guys actually complement each other on the court and just looking at in terms of like a raw accumulated talent on the roster. I don't really need to go that much deeper on the Knicks. You guys know everything that I think about the Knicks, but I would put them very, very much in that conversation. And if there's a world where the Knicks are the 3 seed at the end of the year, and I don't think that is insane to say. Boston, not a great second game, and then you can throw in teams like Philly and I guess Charlotte, who's still undefeated, and Chicago, who's still undefeated. I have my doubts about Chicago and Charlotte. I just think, I mean, maybe people can say this about the Knicks too, but I think defensively there is a little smoke and mirrors there with both those teams, and I'm not sure how it holds up throughout the year. I think the Knicks, you could argue not that the Knicks have done that much defensively yet, but you could argue the same. But I think Mitchell Robinson is a grounding force on that end of the floor that those other 2 teams don't really have at the 5, or Tom Thibodeau as a head coach guiding that system and guiding things along. Again, Boston, a lot of variance as well. Like they're still, I know 0-2, but team that could very well end up the 3 seed. At the end of all this, they just have that much talent, but I question the cohesiveness of that talent a little bit. Like, not that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum still feel like not an odd fit, because obviously defensively it's incredible to have 2 guys like that, but offensively it feels like they're dueling banjos a little bit. Like, I mean, we saw that in the next game. Like Jaylen was going off, Tatum was really struggling, and that's not to say there aren't nights where they're both going to be hot, but I don't really see, outside of like detracting defensive attention from one another, where they really elevate each other's game. And I kind of question that throughout the entirety of the Celtics lineup. Like, I think there's a lot of talent and like a lot of good versatile players. I don't really see the synergy and the multiplistic effect there. Toronto 1-2, fine. Philly, who knows? Call me when Ben Simmons is back. And yeah, that's really it for teams I'm interested in the Eastern Conference. So with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Really, really appreciate you all tuning in. And yeah, we'll be back tonight after the second Magic game. So until then, be good and enjoy the rest of your weekend.